I wonder if I'll still get as excited about honey and bees in a few years when my back's gone from lifting the honey boxes and I've become allergic to bee stings and have to carry one of those EpiPens around with me. It would be nice to think that I do still get excited by it. If you've not already watched the first video I did about the honey harvest, which is from a few weeks ago, it might be worth watching that before you watch this one. For a couple of reasons really. One is that I think I might skip over a few of the really in-depth details on this one because I've already done it in the last one. And this video is going to be, quite a bit different. Why? Well, I think I found out by doing that test box last time that the equipment I've got to extract the honey isn't going to work, and that's why I only did one box. The honey is just way too thick because it's pure heather honey. And again, if you watch the last video, you'll realise why it wasn't right. So I've changed the equipment this time because today, this time I've got 5 boxes, which is about 40 and 50 frames of honey. That's still not a lot in terms of beekeeping. Some commercial beekeepers have hundreds of boxes, and I'm not going to go into it commercially. I haven't got the back or the resources to do that. It's purely a hobby, a small-scale hobby for me. But 5 boxes is still quite a lot. I'm expecting maybe, 50 kilos, over 100 pounds of honey from this, just from 5 boxes. Before I can even start processing the honey, I've got to get the honey from the bees. And the first thing I need to do is to put these clearer boards on. Remember these from last time? These go under the honey supers. The bees go down this little hole into this plastic cage, and they come out of these very small holes at either side, down into the brood box. And it just makes the honey supers that little bit quieter. Makes it easier for me to get the frames out without being chased home by the bees. Now I've got to put these on all the hives that I'm going to be taking honey from. And I've got to do that today, give it about a day or two to quieten down, and then I can go and get the honey. You might be wondering why I'm bothering to use these clearer boards, because I could quite easily just brush the bees off the frames or blow them out. Well, it's because I'm a big softie really, and I don't want to stress the bees out any more than I have to. By putting these clearer boards on and having a bit of patience, they'll make their own way out of the honey super, and that saves them and me the hassle of evicting them tomorrow. And if the bees are happy, I'm happy. Well, they might not be happy when they realise I've stolen some of the honey. It's the morning after I put the clearer boards on. So they've been there about 20 hours. Now normally, the kind of boffins say that 24, 48 hours is about right. But last time when we did the other hive, hive 1, that only took 24 hours and it was virtually clear. I think there was 2 bees left in there. Now the issue I've got is that I've got 3 clearer boards, but I've got 4 hives that I want to clear because I want to process the honey tomorrow. So the plan is that instead of waiting while this evening to take the clearer boards off and take the supers away from the hives, I'm going to take one away now. Now it's quite early in the morning, the sun's not been risen that long. And hive 4, the one on the end to my left hand side, is the quieter of the 3 hives that have got clearer boards on. Now, I know they say you should take the supers off in the evening when it's quieter, but it's actually quiet now. And it's been quite cool overnight. It got down to about 5 or 6 degrees. So I'm hoping the bees are quite chilled, not fully awake yet. I'm going to try and take the super, put everything back together, take the clearer board so I can put it on the other hive without any trouble. There's quite a few more bees in here than there was in the other one. Quite a lot actually. Let's have a look. So this is what I want, the clearer board. Whoa. 1 or 2 of the bees are always attracted to the furry windshield on the microphone, and that buzzing you can hear is one of them trying to bury themselves deep into it to sting it. Now this is the clearer board that I need to put on one of the other hives. Now I've cleared the bees from it, I can put the crown board back on the hive and hopefully make a quick escape with the honey. Hive back together. They're not happy. There's not a lot of them, There's only a few, but they know what's going on. But I've got the clearer board and I've got the super. Let's get out of here. When I'm causing mayhem by the beehives, it doesn't matter how much you try and clear the bees from the super, because you're next to the hive, so they're just going to keep coming back. So I've learned to take the super box away from the hive before taking it in the house. And this way, any bees that are left in there, I can clear away and they'll just fly back to the hive rather than surprising me later on in the house. This morning, I took away from hive 4, which is the one on the end. So we've just got these two in the middle. Now you can see the one to the left-hand side has got 2 supers. You can see that because it's a little bit taller than the one next to it, which is hive 3. That's the swarm, the black bee swarm. Do you remember that? So tonight, we've got to take the 2 supers from hive 2, and then we've got to take the single super off hive 3. Now, as you might have noticed, it's evening again. It's the same evening of when we took hive 4 this morning. And the sun's just set, so we're working, hopefully, with enough light over the next half an hour or so. So the plan is like we did last time. Very quietly, we're going to do hive 3 first. We're going to take the strap off, take the lid off, hopefully get the super, make sure there's no bees in it, go over to the other side of the croft, have a check, get the bees out, wrap it up and get it inside. And then we're going to do the same thing on the 2 supers on hive 2. Oh, we've got a few bees in, but not many. So this clearer board's been on for about 30 hours. Let's see if we can get this off. Oh, that's looking pretty good. I don't want to stress the bees too much, which is why I'm not taking that clearer board off straight away. I'm going to leave that on there and then just take it off in a day or 2. Good haul. So this is the swarm hive. They literally started with 3 frames of brood in their main hive in July, and they filled all 11 frames in that brood box. And also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and a little bit of the 10 frames of honey. As you can see, each frame is absolutely jam-packed again, quite thick as well. So I've got all the bees off. To be honest, there wasn't many bees on here, there was only 1 or 2. I think they've all gone. There's none left, that's just the one that's not quite done. Right, let's get this one indoors. So I'm quite happy. There's just 1 bee, which is probably one of the workers from over there, and she's gone straight back to bed. So I'll take that as a success. Right, so we've got this one now, or these 2. This is the main brood box, this is where they all live. This is 1 super, this is the 2nd super. Now I checked the other day and both of them are full of honey. Let's take the lid off, see if we can get it without waking them up. Oh, this is looking good. The clearer board has done an amazing job. Again, not a single bee in this one, I don't think. Let's give it a good check. All that capped honey. I think this is completely clear. It is completely clear. Result. Super number 2. 2 down, 1 to go. I'm hoping this is just as quiet. No, we've got quite a few bees in this one. This was the busiest. There was probably about 40 bees in this. Some of them got out as we were walking away from the hives. Hopefully there's still enough light for them to find their way home. Well, that went really rather well. The last one that we took off was the busiest. There was a couple of 3 or 4 dozen in there. But they're quite kind of sleepy and droopy because of the time, and it is getting a bit chilly. So most of them went back in when we took it off. I just brushed them off and they just crawled back in the front. And a couple more we got when we were bagging it up. You might have noticed a couple of things different as well this time. This honey we're going to be using to sell. You're going to be able to buy this honey. Hence there's a few things differently, like you notice the food grade bags, so that we're not putting supers on the floor and the gloves and everything. I think we've just managed it. The light's just going behind the hill. So I think that's it for tonight. See you tomorrow. And here they are, all 5 supers. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And I can still hear a little bit of buzzing from inside this one, which is why I've just cut it open to see if I can release the bee that's been trapped in there since last night, which is when we got this one. These weigh a lot more than that first super from that last vlog a couple of weeks ago. So much so that I think I actually want to weigh the super to see how much it weighs, okay? So I weigh 75.3 kilos, and let's see how much with the super. Wow. So just over 21 kilos that one weighs. They're all about the same as well. And because I got these supers off a couple of weeks after the last one that you saw, a lot more of the honey on both sides of the frames has already been capped with wax, which led me to believe that if I took water content readings through the refractometer, that the water content might be a bit lower, because if you remember, it has to be below 20% for me to be able to call it honey, ideally less than about 18.5%. So I tested one frame from each of the 5 supers. The lowest reading I got was hovering around 15.9, 16%, which is amazing. That's lower than the last batch. The highest reading I got, which I think was from the bottom one, and that did have a couple of cells kind of around the edges that weren't quite fully covered, but even that was still only 17.2% water, which is still well underneath where we need it to be able to call it honey. Each of these boxes holds 10 frames, and I've counted them all up, and across the 5 boxes we've got 39 full frames, and we've got a few that are just on one side and a few that have got nothing at all. So the next step is to start extracting it. Now, if you remember last time, a couple of weeks ago, I got myself all excited, ready to spin all the honey out with the spinny Radial extractor, and because it was heather honey, most of it wouldn't budge, and I ended up having to press it out. Well, this time I've got some new equipment. So first thing I've got to do is build all the new equipment, give the kitchen a deep clean, and then we can start extracting again. Because my heather honey's consistency is so thick, my Radial extractor wasn't really much use. So after the last video, I spoke to a couple of experienced beekeepers that I really trust, and I decided to get a Hydropress. Now, these things are normally used to press fruit, but you can press honeycomb with them too, and it works remarkably well. Beekeepers have used pressers for years, but mostly the hydraulic type that screw down and force all the contents under pressure to the bottom of a tank. A Hydropress works in a slightly different but noticeably better way. Firstly, it contains a bladder and it runs through the middle of the cylinder, and it looks like a huge sausage. I attach a hose pipe to the bottom of the press, and the bladder fills up with water, expanding outwards, creating an outward pressure, and that squeezes the honey out from the comb and through the mesh at the side of the cylinder. Now, I've got to keep an eye on the pressure, firstly by emptying any air in the bladder by pressing this release valve until water comes out. It's a bit like bleeding a radiator. Then I've got to make sure the pressure doesn't go above 3 bar when I'm using it, otherwise the water will automatically release the pressure through a tap underneath the press. I've also got this new stainless steel settling tank, and it should hold about 50 kilograms of my cold filtered honey. Finally, I've got this uncapping tray, which should make removing the wax from the frames just that little bit less messy than last time. Okay, everything's set to go. And I've got a plan, but I had a plan last time. And remember what happened? Right, everything's set. I've got the uncapping tray just over the sink with the container underneath it and my uncapping knife ready. Once I've got all the cappings off, I'm going to cut the comb from the frames and put them into the press. I've washed the lining of the press as well, but I didn't show you that. I ran it through the washing machine and then I actually boiled it in the sink for half an hour and had a cup of coffee. But anyway, regardless, I'm going to put the cut combs and then the cappings from the tray into the press. Now this is where I think if there's going to be any drama today, this is where it will be because running quite a high pressure hose pipe through the window into the kitchen, into a Hydropress, I think if anything's going to go wrong, that will be the point. I've got some pans and towels and the mop ready, just in case. Now I tried it outside and everything was okay. Once we've got the honey out of the press, it's going to go into these buckets. And from these buckets, it's going to go into the settling tank, which is just to my right hand side. Now the settling tank does have legs and you can floor stand it. But because I'm going to be doing most of the processing in here, and because it's easier for me to jar rather than squatting down on the floor to jar, I'm actually leaving the settling tank up here, just resting on a towel so it doesn't damage the worktop. I'm going to leave the honey in there for about 2 days, I think, to let it settle, and any air bubbles that are going to come up, because it is going to be quite thick honey, that couple of days is going to give any bubbles the chance to come up. I think there might still be some in because it is going to be quite thick. Once that's done, then we'll start jarring the honey in a couple of days, and we'll just use the little honey gate on the front of the tank, open it, fill the jars. Hopefully, again, fingers crossed, there's a lot of hope in this one. My labels for my honey jars will have arrived by the time we're ready to jar it up. So I'm hoping the labels come so that I can put them on. That's just going to be a nice finishing touch. And then the final thing I'm going to do is, if I can, save any of the frames, which I've already got some from last time. I'm going to put them back into a super, give them back to 1 or 2 of the hives, depending how many we get. And the bees will clean up those frames. It'll only take them a couple of days to get any residual honey, nectar and bits and pieces off there. They'll clean them up like new. I can then take them out and I'll freeze them for a couple of days. That gets rid of any wax, moth, eggs and pests. And then I'll seal them up in airtight bags and keep them over the winter. And then next year, it's a little bit less work for them to do when they start producing honey again. Well, I've got to be honest, this is not quicker than I thought it was going to be with the extractor. I think I just had it in my head that because this is a press, that I just throw everything in and press it. Which I've got to do yet, to be honest. I mean, I haven't got to that part yet. But the thing I have found, which to be honest is not going to be a problem from now on, is that most of the frames I'm using are wired frames. And to be honest, I never gave it a second thought when I first got the frames and the hives and everything. And I never imagined that I'd have to buy a Hydropress to get the heather honey out. So why are wired frames a problem when you've got a Hydropress? Well, for a start, if you think about it, there's a big kind of rubber bladder in the middle of it, and the last thing I want is to put bits of wire at high pressure and the wire pierces the bladder. You can see what could go wrong there. But the problem is these frames have wire that kind of go up and down diagonally across the frame, and when it's like this I have to literally get my hands in there and pick every little last bit of honey and the comb out, or try and cut along the lines. That's really time consuming when you've got 30, 40 frames to do. Now luckily some of them are not wired and I can just cut them out into chunks, but a lot of them I would say, I don't know, between half and 3/4 are wired. So it's taken me an hour to do 2 boxes. So saving time, not yet, but next year I'll know not to get wired, because I'm going to be selling it as cut comb anyway, or as chunks in jars, and any that I am pressing for the honey, I'm not going to have wired frames anyway, so it will be a lot easier to just uncap, cut and throw in the press. So you can see this wire here, you can see another one here that's actually broken off completely, some more under my finger, and what I'm having to do is literally cut around these wires, because I don't want any going in the press, do I? Because the wire could puncture the bladder. The last thing we want today is a punctured bladder, is it, Sean? Once again, I am very, very sticky. I've got these disposable aprons now, which are just sticky everywhere, as are the gloves, as are underneath my gloves. I think in my underpants is sticky, and not for that reason. And it is very tedious, like I said, getting all between those wire frames. But I've got one more super to do, so 4 down. 1 to go, so about 8 frames left to do, so I should have those done in about half an hour. Now the thing that surprised me is that the press is actually pressing before I've done anything with it. As the honey and the comb and everything, and even the cappings that I'm putting in there, as it starts to pile up, it adds pressure to itself, which starts pushing the honey through the filter bag. And we've already got half a bucket of honey under there, which from last time was about 7 kilos. So we've probably got about 7 kilos of honey already, just from it sat there. The other thing I've noticed is that it's thicker and darker honey than last time. These are from different hives, and these were very close to all that heather that you saw in those videos a few weeks ago. So, and I can tell by just how thick it is, because I'm having to move it around the press so that it comes out and into the bucket. Once that bucket's full, I'm going to transfer it through another filter where it will sit for a couple of days. Right, I better make a start on this last box. Right, everything's going to plan. Weirdly, although it was just after this point last time with the extractor spinner that things didn't go to plan, and we've got the hose pipe to do yet. Yeah, all the comb and all the cappings and everything that contains honey is now in the Hydropress. I folded the bag that you put everything in, I folded that up at the top, I've put the lid on, I've screwed it down nice and tight but not too tight, and the honey is still coming out. Now it's actually nearly filled the first bucket, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to weigh this bucket so that we know how much honey we've got when we add it all together, and then I'm going to pour that through the filter into the retaining tank where it's going to sit for a couple of days, and then start the second bucket going, and then we're going to get the hose out.
The first bucket comes in at just under 11.5 kilos, or just over 25 pounds of honey. The Hydropress came with a short length of hose. It's got a strong metal connector that attaches to the press on one end, and a universal connector that attaches to our own hose pipe on the other. I hope it is strong. The last thing I want is a flooded kitchen.
Well, the honey is flowing very nicely. It's very dark. It actually tastes a bit more like toffee. We've brought the hose pipe in the house. It just, I don't know, it just sounds wrong, doesn't it? We've connected it up like I did outside. When it did work outside, there was a little drip on the connection, but we've put a bowl or a pan under that connection, so that should catch any little drips. I've also put another bowl under the main connection. You can see I'm worried about this, can't you? under the connection to the press. We've got a mop and we've got an isolator for the water, so if anything happens we can switch the water off from the press. Now the press shouldn't go above 3 bars of pressure, and there's a little pressure indicator that will tell me when we get in, if we get close to 3 bars. If we do, I've got to turn the pressure down slightly, otherwise it will just come out the bottom at the other end. So we've got the bucket that's filling up that is about 1/4 full, and we've got 2 empty buckets ready and waiting.
The Hydropress instructions do warn you to expect quite a substantial flow once that pressure starts to build. And wow, it really does. The amount of honey coming through that cylinder increases by about 10 times, and it starts to fill that channel at the bottom so much that it starts to overtop and drip onto the floor. So I just turn the tap down a little bit, it reduces the pressure, and it just makes things go a little bit more slowly.
It's actually really impressive. If it hadn't have been for the wires slowing me down with the combs, I think this would have gone a lot quicker. It was a bit scary to use because I've never used a Hydropress before. The principle of it is really simple. Basically, the bladder inside expands with water to a certain pressure, which you can see from the gauge underneath, and it squeezes the comb, the wax, and the honey comes out the sides, it rolls down the edges, it comes forward through this hole and down into the clean buckets that are waiting below. This is bucket number 4, I think. Yeah, the first one was just over 11 kilos, the second one just over 13 kilos, the third one was 14 kilos, so we're on 30 something kilos, and this one's half full. So I reckon we'll get probably between 40 and 50 kilos of honey, which is impressive, except for the sticky. Everything is sticky. Everything. I can wash my hands with my gloves and I turn around to do something and they're sticky and I've not even touched anything.
Bucket 4 weighs in at 10.48 kilograms, giving us a total just a fraction short of 50 kilos, which is about 110 pounds. While that's going through its second filter, I need to empty the water from the Hydropress and then carefully take it apart to remove all that leftover beeswax from the bag and cylinder.
I'm actually really impressed at the efficiency of this thing. The pressure inside must have been absolutely massive because the wax that's left over is literally solid. You can it's literally solid, and it's probably about ½ an inch thick around the insides of this bag, which I'm just kind of breaking up because I am going to keep it. A lot of people have been asking what I'm going to do with the wax. I'm actually working on a project. I'm not going to be making candles and furniture polish and things like that. I think I mentioned that in a vlog a couple of weeks ago. I am working on something which is going to take me a few months to get off the ground, I think. But this is absolutely amazing stuff. It's taking some breaking up, but I'm going to be able to use this bag too. So once I've got all the wax out, I can give it a good wash and then it's usable again. And that's another great thing about this Hydropress, is it doesn't use any power. No electricity, just water. And I can just wash this in fresh water afterwards and use it again. I'm really impressed by it. I am knackered, absolutely knackered. It is just gone 9:15 in the evening, and it's just been... I can now understand why real, true Ling Heather honey is so expensive to buy in the shops. I was looking online a few days ago, and like the really good stuff, you can pay anything from like 10, 15, some places are charging like 20, 30 quid. You think, what? Yeah, now I understand. It just takes forever to process. And I've always got in the back of my mind that thought of,
I'm not complaining, I'm just kind of saying it takes a long time, because in the back of my mind I've got the thought of the bees doing all the work, which it takes some generations of bees just to create the honey that we're taking today. And next time it will be easier next year, because we won't have the wired comb. I know I keep going on about that. That's the bane of my life today, is that stuff. I don't want to see another wired frame for the rest of my life. But it's done. Kitchen is semi-sticky. I've cleaned it as best as I can. I've actually run out of detergent to get rid of the sticky. But yeah, everywhere, it's up the fridge. I haven't been working near the fridge. It's on the front of the dishwasher. I haven't touched the dishwasher. And it's a weird thing, because I know that when you're working with food, you're supposed to kind of just keep cleaning as you go, which I've been doing. So every time I use something, I clean it properly. But yeah, everything is so sticky. Oh, but it's going to be worth it. We've got now 50 litres, I think. I've got to add it up yet. I've got about 50 litres of honey in the tank, and I'm going to leave that for a couple of days to settle. I had a little sneaky peek just before I turned the camera on, and there's a lot of like bubbles at the top. Foam, I think they call it, honey foam. But that's it for tonight. I am definitely ready for a bath, and then an early night, and then do some more tomorrow. Good night. My muscles are absolutely screaming after yesterday. I think my right arm, from cutting the cappings off all those frames, when I'm not used to it, I'd probably need to strengthen my right arm a bit more. Although some of you probably disagree with that. Obscene. But yeah, that and my back from leaning down, I really need to get fit again and start some mobility, some stretching exercises. I wanted to show you these because one thing about using the Hydropress is that it basically destroys all the frames. Now, when we put brand new frames in for the bees to build on, which look like this, it has a kind of honeycomb shape, and the bees draw the comb out. So they build the comb, which they then put the nectar and the honey into. But it involves work. They have to work to do that. And I feel a little bit guilty by having to crush the frames in the Hydropress to get the honey out, because that means that next year, when we put new frames in, they've got to start again. Now, when we use the extractor, do you remember a couple of weeks ago, that's slightly different, because the honey on the ones that did comes out and it leaves the frames looking like that. Now, there's traces of honey in there, no great quantity. But when you look closely at the frame, you can still see the honeycomb. And what I can do is I can put these frames that I did manage to save back into a super, and I'm going to put it back into one of the busier, most populated hives, because the bees, and it'll only take them a day or two to do this, they'll clean through these frames and they'll be like brand new. So in a couple of days, I'll go back to the hive, take them off, I'll freeze them in a chest freezer we've got in one of the barns for about 2 days, and that kills any wax moth eggs, any pests like that. I'll seal them up, really well sealed for the winter, and then next spring I can use these frames in some of the hives, and it's a little bit less work for the bees to do to draw them out again. Now, I know there's still going to be people that are saying, well, it's a bit unfair on the bees that they have to build new ones every year, isn't there, and nothing you can do. Well, if I was making runny honey or wildflower honey, then it wouldn't be so much of a problem, because we'd be able to use the Radial extractor and save most of the frames, if not all of them. But because 99% of what we're producing up here is Ling Heather honey, it's well known to be very thick, as you've seen from the videos we've done. And we've tried the Radial extractors and they just don't work. Now there's other ways you can do it. You can loosen it up by working in a warm environment and using machines that push needles to agitate the heather honey, and it releases it a little bit. But even those damage the frames, and when you put the damaged frames in the radial extractor and spin it, it still blows them out. So what's the solution? I don't think there is a way that we can extract the heather honey and save the frames to this good of condition. So I think what we're going to have to do is, from next season, I'm only going to use foundation that's not got wires in it, as we've established, and we're going to be able to provide 3 types of honey. One is going to be cut comb honey, where we basically just cut the comb into sections and sell it in the comb. The second variation is where we take slightly smaller cut sections and we put those into jar and top it up with honey. And then the third is where we just sell the pure honey as it is. If we use frames that haven't got wires on them, then it's going to be easier to cut, it's going to be easier to process. But I think it's just a reality that with Ling Heather Honey, there's no way that we can do it while saving the frames to that kind of condition so that the bees can reuse them. Of course, as I keep saying, I'm not an expert, I'm still new to this, a bit of a green beak. So if you know of a way of extracting the really thick Ling Heather honey and maintaining the frames so that we can give them back to the bees, by all means let me know, because I would much prefer to do that than have them create and draw out new comb every year.
After giving the box of empty frames back to one of the hives, I thought I'd leave the honey I'd extracted yesterday just a few more days before putting it into jars.
I'm a big believer in continuity. So to prove that I've left it a few days between extracting the honey and jarring it up, I've purposely had a haircut, not had a shave, changed my top, so that you believe that it's been a few days. It's actually been 4 or 5 days since we extracted the honey. It's been in the settling tank, and I've been keeping an eye on it to make sure it's okay. I just like the smell of it, to be honest. And today we're going to transfer it from the settling tank into the jars, which you can see about half of them behind me. To this side I've got my jug and my food standard gloves in there. I've got a bucket which is full of lids. Tell you what, washing those is a noisy job, I'll tell you that. When we do the jarring, we have to sterilise the jars and the lids first. They come already clean, but we put all the jars through the dishwasher on the hottest wash, and then we take them out, air dry them, and then they go in the oven for about 15 minutes at about 180 degrees Celsius. And they are clean, honestly. We let them cool down a little bit first. The lids go through a similar process. They go through the dishwasher on a hot wash, and then they are air dried too. So the jars and the lids are sterilised. I've got my gloves, I've got my jug. Next step is to start emptying the honey from the settling tank into the jug, and then from the jug where we can measure it into the jars. As you can see, it is really thick. If I rock it from one side to another, it hardly moves. It's very thick set, and that's because it's heather honey, which is notoriously very thick, and it took forever. It probably took about 2 minutes just to fill this 2-litre jar from there. Right, let's crack on with jarring it up. I know you can get machines that dispatch exactly the right amount of honey from the tank into these jars, and it does it quite quickly, but
I don't know. I mean, even though I've probably got a couple of hundred of these to do, it's kind of therapeutic. Although I could do with a chair, to be honest, after being here a couple of hours. I think the other thing is that pouring every single jar by hand, it just feels just that bit more personal. Do you know what I mean? It's like every single jar of this honey that we send out is, at every single stage, has been processed really carefully by hand, from extracting it from the bees and extracting the honey from the frames and then filtering it all and then sterilizing the jars and filling the jars. And then even the shipping bit, when we send it out, we kind of label it by hand, or we're gonna do, and then we'll be sending it out and packaging each individual one, giving it to the post lady to take. So I don't know what it is, I just think, even though it probably takes 10 times longer, getting a lot more satisfaction knowing that every single jar has kind of come from our own hands, from leaving the bees until the postman delivers it to you. I expected it to take maybe a couple of hours to do all the jarring. Yeah, right, 5.5 hours it's taken me. But we've got 187 jars of honey, which is amazing. And the best thing about it for me is that whichever jar you pick out, every single jar is kind of completed by hand. So as soon as it's left the bees, kind of taking the supers, uncapping, extracting the honey using the press, filtering it, sterilising the jars, pouring it into the jars, putting the lid on nice and tight, and then the labelling, which we've got to do next. Every single jar has been done by hand, which I'm kind of proud of, because I think when we send them out then, it's like I was saying earlier, when we send them out, I know that every jar has been, it's like personal from me to you. I love that. Right, I'm going to have a little bit of something to eat, and then we've got to crack on with putting labels on them all. I'm looking forward to labelling them because I think it's just going to finish it off. Do you know what I mean? When you look at the jars look pretty enough as they are, and that lovely kind of amber coloured heather honey inside. You can still see what looks like bits of wax. It's not wax, it's just air bubbles because of the way it was pressed out of the cones. It's taken a while for the bubbles, and they will eventually rise to the top. So if you buy any, you might see a couple of bubbles right at the top. But it is rich and smooth as anything. But I think the label is just going to finish it off. And we've got two labels that are going on. So the first one are these. These are anti-tamper tags. So that's just so that you know that if you get it, that nobody's opened the lid. And the labels themselves are on this roll. You can just see them there. So the labels are clear so that you can see straight through. And I've actually done one already to show you what I mean. So there you go. That's what the jar looks like. So that's the main label on the front. There's some information that by law we have to put on the jar, and that's on this side. And then there's some information just on the other side about how to store it and our social media and things like that. And then if you just look on here, you can just see that anti-tamper tag, which goes up, sticks to the lid, and then goes under the label on this side. Pouring the honey was quite a therapeutic experience. I think putting the labels on is going to be even better. And here it is, honey! Oh, it smells lush. Thing is, when I do that on the camera, it's never quite in focus. And I can imagine...
Well, don't do it.
I can imagine the viewer trying to grab it when I go close. Now, we are getting a lot of questions already asking, where can we buy it? It will be available on our new website, which is going to be launched, well, within the next week or two. Hopefully. If we can get it done. It might be 2 or 3 weeks, it might be 1 or 2 weeks. But we will let you know on our social media as soon as the website is up and running. And that's where you'll be able to buy the honey from. Now, the other thing, a question we get asked quite a lot is, can you ship it to this country or that country? Well, at the moment, we can only ship it to the UK. By UK, I mean England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. We can't do like territories like Gibraltar and places like that. America, we're still trying to register with the authorities, and it's probably going to be next year before we can ship to America. The same with Europe, same with Canada. Australia, New Zealand is just a no-no because
they won't allow it.
They won't allow it. So you'll have to come over here and buy it from over here.
Eat it before you get back.
And then go home again.
Because you won't be able to take it home yourself.
I hope that answers all the questions. If you've got any other questions about the honey, just go onto our social media or drop a comment in the comments on this video and we'll answer it the best that we can anyway. I think that's it, isn't it? I am shattered. It's taken a week to film this vlog. Do you think they've noticed yet?
No. Noticed what? Oh, that. It's finished. He's in there.
There might be somebody living in there. Do you want to see? Next week. We'll show you next week. He's still settling in.
Yeah, he is.
And he's a little bit nervous.
Yes, he
as
is.
he would be. Because he's only lived in one place for 5 years since he came out of his egg.
Yes, and it was only a quarter of that size.
So we will show you Sherlock and his new home next time. I hope you've enjoyed this vlog. It's taken some making and editing. I think it's taken longer to edit it than it has to actually film it.
Imagine what it's going to be like next year when there's more honey.
Oh, it's been an eye-opener. I'll tell you that. My back will tell you that as well. I hope you've enjoyed this vlog and found it useful. If you can, please subscribe to our channel. That would make our day.
It'd make our day.
That would light my thing up, would that?
It'd make my whole week.
Here we go. We don't want to know what makes your whole week, thank you. So yeah, subscribe to the channel. Please give this video a thumbs up, give it a like, and if you hit the notifications bell, YouTube will tell you when we release new videos. You've got to turn your notifications on for that. It would also help if you could support the channel so that we can do all this sort of work with Sherlock and the bees and the chickens and all the other stuff we've got planned. Well, hopefully there's a link up above Sean's head on the screen. If it's not there, if it's not on the device you're watching on, go down the video description and it'll be down there.
It will.
Right, I'm off to bed for a week.
Can I have my dinner now?
You can have your honey. That's all you're eating for next month, you. And we'll see you next week and show you Sherlock. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Ta-ra.